The imperial palace of the empire stood like a mountain of glass and silver on the planet Prime. It had 1,000 rooms, 500 servants, and more guards than Princess could count. But for all its size and beauty, the palace was a lonely place for a young princess. Was 12 cycles old when her life changed forever. She was sitting alone in the royal garden, watching the 3 suns set over the distant mountains, when her father returned from his diplomatic journey to the outer systems. Emperor was a giant even by standards. He stood 8 feet tall, with silver skin that glowed faintly in the dying light. His 4 arms were thick with muscle, and his eyes held the cold authority of a ruler who had never known defeat. When he walked through the garden toward his daughter, the ground seemed to tremble beneath his feet. But was not looking at her father. She was looking at the small figure walking behind him. It was a boy, a human boy. Had never seen a human before, except in educational recordings. They were considered a minor species, barely worth studying. They came from a small blue planet called Earth, somewhere in the outer regions of the galaxy. They were short, weak, and lived such brief lives that they considered them little more than animals. This boy was even smaller than had expected. He was thin and pale, with brown hair that fell over his forehead and eyes the color of the deep ocean. He wore simple clothes that looked worn and dirty. He walked with his head down, his shoulders hunched, like a creature that expected to be struck at any moment. Emperor stopped in front of his daughter and gestured toward the boy with one of his lower arms. "This is Danny Harper," the Emperor said. "His colony ship was destroyed by raiders. He was the only survivor. I thought he might be useful for your education. You should understand the lesser species if you are to rule them one day." Looked at the boy. He did not look up. He did not speak. He simply stood there, trembling slightly in the cool evening air. "He is very small," said. "Humans are small," her father replied. "They are also fragile, short-lived, and unremarkable in every way, but they are numerous, and one day you may need to deal with them. Consider this a lesson in patience." The Emperor turned and walked away, leaving the boy standing alone in the garden with the princess. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, studied the human with curiosity. He was so different from anyone she had ever seen. He had only 2 arms. His skin was a strange pinkish color. His ears were round and small, pressed flat against the sides of his head. "Are you afraid?" asked. The boy finally looked up. His eyes met hers and she saw something unexpected in them. Not fear exactly, something deeper, something that looked like loss. "Yes," he said. His voice was quiet but steady. "But I have been afraid for a long time now. I am getting used to it." Did not know what to say to that. She was a princess. She had never been afraid of anything in her life. Her every need was met before she could ask. Her every want was satisfied before she could wish. She had never lost anything, never suffered, never known what it meant to be alone. But looking at this small human boy, she felt something stir inside her, something she could not name. "Come," she said, rising from her seat. "I will show you where you will sleep." She expected him to follow silently, like a servant. Instead, he walked beside her, matching her pace despite his shorter legs. He looked around at the garden with wide eyes, taking in the strange flowers and the glowing trees and the fountains that flowed with liquid silver. "It is beautiful here," he said softly. "You think so?" was surprised. Most visitors to the palace were too intimidated to speak, let alone offer opinions. "Yes, on my colony we lived in metal boxes. We never saw real plants or open sky. This is like something from a dream." They walked in silence for a while, found herself stealing glances at the boy. He was so small, so fragile. She could break him with one hand if she wanted to. And yet there was something in the way he carried himself, something in the steadiness of his voice, that made her think he was not as weak as he appeared. "What happened to your colony?" she asked. Danny did not answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was flat, empty of emotion. Raiders came. They wanted our supplies. When we could not give them enough, they destroyed everything. My mother put me in an escape pod before the end. I watched the ship burn from space. Stopped walking. She turned to face the boy, her forearms hanging at her sides. I am sorry, she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. She had never apologized to anyone before. Danny looked up at her. A small, sad smile crossed his face. Thank you. No one else has said that to me since it happened. From that night forward, everything was different. The palace had given Danny a small room in the servants' quarters, but insisted he be moved closer to her chambers. The servants were confused. The nobles were offended, but the princess was stubborn, and eventually they gave in. Danny became her constant companion. At first, the other noble children mocked him. They called him a pet, a toy, a lesser creature that the princess kept for amusement. They pushed him in the hallways. They hid his food. They told him that humans were worthless and that he should be grateful to breathe the same air as the. Put a stop to it. She was small for her, but she was still twice the size of any human, and she had been trained in combat since she could walk. The first noble child who laid hands on Danny in her presence spent a week in the medical bay. After that, no one touched him again. In return, Danny gave her something she had never had before, a true friend. He taught her human games, simple things like card games and word puzzles, things that they considered beneath them, but loved them. She loved the way Danny laughed when she made mistakes. She loved the stories he told about Earth, about oceans and forests and animals with fur. She loved the way he looked at the stars at night and named the constellations from his. For 3 years, they were inseparable. They explored every corner of the palace together. They snuck into the kitchens to steal sweet cakes. They lay on the roof of the royal observatory and watched meteor showers paint the sky with fire. Learned that humans were not weak. They were simply different. Danny could not lift heavy objects or run as fast as but he could think in ways that surprised her. He could solve problems that left her tutors baffled. He could see connections and patterns that her people missed entirely. Most importantly, he could make her laugh. Real laughter, not the polite sound she made at court functions. The kind of laughter that hurt her stomach and made her eyes water. Then the war came. It started with border skirmishes between the Empire and the Dominion. Small battles, far from the capital. But the skirmishes grew into conflicts, and the conflicts grew into something larger. By the time Danny was 13, the Empire was at war. Emperor issued a decree. All non-essential aliens were to be expelled from space immediately. It was a matter of security, he said, a matter of survival. Begged her father to make an exception. She argued, pleaded, even threatened, but the Emperor was immovable. He is human, said coldly. His presence here is a distraction at best, a liability at worst. He leaves tomorrow. That night, and Danny sat together on the roof of the observatory for the last time. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The stars burned overhead, countless and indifferent. I do not want you to go, said finally. Her voice broke on the words. Danny reached over and took her hand. His fingers were so small compared to hers, so warm. I know, he said. I do not want to go either, but I will come back, I promise. Looked at him. In the starlight, his eyes shone with something she had never seen before, something fierce and certain. How can you promise that? The galaxy is so big. The war could last for years. You are just one human. Danny smiled. It was not a sad smile this time. It was something else, something that made her believe him despite everything. I will find a way, he said. No matter how long it takes, no matter what I have to become, I will come back for you. The next morning, stood on her balcony and watched the transport ship carry Danny away. It grew smaller and smaller until it was just a point of light among the stars. Then it was gone. She stood there for a long time after that, staring at the empty sky. 20 years would pass before she saw Danny Harper again. 20 years of war had changed everything. Princess stood in the command center of the Imperial flagship, watching the tactical displays with tired eyes. She was 32 cycles old now, no longer the curious child who had befriended a human boy in her father's garden. War had hardened her. Loss had shaped her. She had become something cold and sharp, a weapon in the service of an empire that was slowly dying. The Dominion had proven to be an enemy unlike any that had faced before. They were reptilian creatures, cold-blooded and patient, with scales the color of dried blood and eyes that held no mercy. They bred quickly, fought without fear, and seemed to have no limit to their numbers. For every soldier they killed, 10 more took its place. The war had consumed 3 generations of warriors, had watched her people die by the millions on battlefields across 100 worlds. Her eldest brother had fallen at the Siege of Prime. Her second brother had been captured and executed by the High Command. Her youngest brother had simply disappeared during a reconnaissance mission, his ship found drifting empty in the void. She was the only one left. Emperor still ruled, but he was a shadow of the giant who had once terrified his enemies. He was old now, his silver skin faded to gray, his 4 arms thin and weak. He spent most of his days in the throne room, staring at maps of territories they no longer controlled, mumbling about strategies that no longer mattered. The empire was losing, everyone knew it, no one said it aloud. Turned away from the tactical display and walked to the observation window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, they were massing for another assault. Somewhere out there, more soldiers were preparing to die. She thought about Danny sometimes in quiet moments like this. She wondered if he was still alive. She wondered if he ever thought about her. Most likely, he had forgotten all about the alien princess who had been his friend for 3 short years. Humans lived such brief lives. 20 years was nearly half a lifetime for them. He had probably married, had children, grown old. She hoped he was happy wherever he was. She hoped he had found a home. The door behind her opened. An admiral entered the command center. He was one of the few competent officers left in the Imperial fleet, a veteran of 100 battles who had somehow survived when so many others had fallen. "Your Highness," he said, his voice grave, "we have received a message from the outer sectors. Something unexpected has happened." Turned to face him, unexpected how? Hesitated. In all her years of knowing him, she had never seen him hesitate. "The humans have entered the war." For a moment could not speak. Humans. In this war. The idea seemed absurd. Earth was a minor world, barely significant enough to appear on imperial star charts. Their technology was primitive. Their military was small. They had no business involving themselves in a conflict between 2 of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. "That is suicide," she said finally. "That will destroy them in a matter of weeks." "That is what everyone thought," replied. "But Your Highness, the reports are remarkable. The humans are not fighting for us. They are not fighting for they have declared themselves a third force, and they are attacking both sides wherever they find weakness." Frowned. "That makes no sense. Why would they invite destruction from 2 empires?" "I do not know, but in the past 6 months they have won 17 major engagements. They have disrupted supply lines across 3 sectors. They have liberated 4 colony worlds that we had given up for lost." Paused. "And they have done it with a fleet 1/10 the size of ours." Stared at him. This was impossible. The humans she had studied were clever, yes, but they were also weak, fragile, limited by their biology. How could they possibly compete against species that were stronger, faster, and more advanced? "Show me the reports," she said. Handed her a data tablet. She scrolled through the information quickly, her eyes widening with each page. The human tactics were unlike anything she had ever seen. They did not fight in the traditional way, meeting their enemies in open battle. Instead, they struck from shadows. They appeared where they were not expected, destroyed critical targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Their soldiers were terrifying, small and weak compared to but utterly relentless. They fought in environments that would kill most species. They adapted to every situation with frightening speed. They showed no fear, even when facing certain death. And at the center of every major victory was a single name, the ghost of Helix 9. Read the reports about him 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. No one knew his real identity. He wore a helmet that covered his face completely, and he never removed it in public. He commanded the human forces from the front lines, fighting alongside his soldiers in every battle. They had put a bounty on his head equal to the value of an entire planet. At the Battle of Helix 9, he had held a defensive position alone for 3 days against an assault force. When human reinforcements finally arrived, they found him standing among the bodies of 200 enemy soldiers, wounded in a dozen places but still breathing. They called him a demon. The soldiers who had seen him fight called him something worse, a human. Something stirred in his chest as she read about him, something she could not name. There was a familiarity in his tactics, a pattern she recognized but could not place. The way he protected his soldiers above all else. The way he found solutions to impossible problems. The way he refused to give up, even when all hope seemed lost. She shook her head. She was imagining things. The ghost of Helix 9 was just a human commander, one of thousands. There was no reason to believe he was anyone she knew. Over the following months, the human campaign continued to grow. Earth sent more ships, more soldiers, more resources. The caught between 2 enemies began to struggle. For the first time in 20 years, the war seemed winnable. Emperor, roused from his despair by the changing tide, authorized diplomatic contact with Earth. The humans were no longer a minor species to be ignored. They were potential allies, and the needed allies desperately. Volunteered to lead the diplomatic mission. She told herself it was because she understood humans better than anyone else in the Empire. She had lived with one for 3 years after all. She knew their language, their customs, their way of thinking. But deep in her heart, she knew the real reason. She wanted to meet the ghost of Helix 9. She wanted to see his face. She wanted to know if the feeling in her chest meant anything, or if she was just a foolish princess chasing memories of a boy who had left her 20 years ago. The human flagship was called the Constellation. It was smaller than vessels, built for speed and stealth rather than raw power. When Shuttle docked with it, she felt a strange sensation, like stepping into a memory. The corridors were narrow by standards. The lighting was warm and yellow, not the cold blue of imperial ships. Everything smelled different, organic somehow, alive in a way that vessels never were. A human officer met her at the airlock. He was young and nervous, clearly uncomfortable in the presence of a princess. He led her through the ship to a large conference room where the negotiations would take place. The room was empty when she arrived, except for a single figure standing by the window. He was average height for a human, dressed in a simple military uniform. His back was to her, and he wore a helmet that covered his entire head. Even without seeing his face, she knew who he was. The ghost of Helix 9 turned to face her. "Princess," he said. His voice was filtered through the helmet, mechanical and unrecognizable. "Welcome aboard the Constellation. I am Commander Harper. I will be representing Earth in these negotiations." Felt her heart stop, both of them at the same time, for one terrible, wonderful moment. Harper, his name was Harper. "Commander," she said, somehow keeping her voice steady. "Thank you for receiving me. I look forward to our discussions." She studied him as she spoke, searching for any sign, any clue, but the helmet hid everything. His posture was military, disciplined, nothing like the gentle boy she remembered. His voice was distorted beyond recognition. He could be anyone. And yet, There was something in the way he stood, something in the slight tilt of his head as he listened to her speak, something she had seen 1,000 times in a garden far away a lifetime ago. The negotiations began. They discussed troop movements, supply routes, strategic objectives. Commander Harper was professional and precise, revealing nothing personal, betraying no emotion. He was a perfect military officer. But was watching, she was always watching. On the second day, he gestured with his right hand while making a point about fleet positioning. It was a small movement, almost unconscious. He spread his fingers and then brought them together, punctuating his words. Had seen that exact gesture before. Danny used to do it when he was explaining the rules of human card games. Her breath caught in her throat. She covered it with a cough, but she knew. In that moment she knew. She did not say anything. She was not certain enough, not yet. But a fire had ignited inside her, a hope she had thought dead for 20 years. The boy who had promised to come back for her had kept his word. Now she just had to find a way to make him show his face. The negotiations continued for 3 more days. Watched Commander Harper with new eyes now. Every movement, every word, every small gesture became evidence to be examined. She was building a case in her mind, piece by piece, trying to prove what her hearts already believed. There were so many small things. The way he paused before answering difficult questions, as if carefully choosing his words. The way he listened with his full attention, never interrupting, never dismissing ideas without consideration. The way he treated everyone with the same quiet respect, from the highest admiral to the lowest crew member who brought water to the conference room. Danny had been like that. Even as a child, even as a refugee with nothing, he had treated everyone with dignity. He had once told her that humans believed all people deserved respect, regardless of their position. She had laughed at the idea then. Now she understood it. But she could not be certain, not without seeing his face. Commander Harper never removed his helmet. He ate alone in his quarters. He slept, if he slept at all, in complete privacy. The few times had tried to steer the conversation toward personal matters, he had deflected smoothly, returning to military strategy without missing a beat. The other human officers spoke of him with a mixture of awe and affection. They told stories of his bravery, his tactical genius, his impossible victories. But when she asked about his past, about where he came from, they grew quiet. "The commander does not talk about before," one young lieutenant told her. "None of us know his real history. He just appeared one day, years ago, and started winning battles. That is all we need to know." On the third day, made a decision. If Commander Harper would not reveal himself willingly, she would find another way. She requested a private meeting with him after the formal negotiations concluded. He agreed, as she knew he would. Whatever else he was, Commander Harper was committed to the alliance. He would not refuse a reasonable request from the representative. They met in his personal office, a small room lined with tactical displays and star charts. There were no personal items visible, no photographs, no decorations, nothing that revealed anything about the man behind the helmet. "Princess," he said, standing behind his desk, "what can I do for you?" Closed the door behind her. She stood facing him, her 4 arms folded across her chest, her eyes fixed on the blank surface of his helmet. "I want to thank you," she said. "On behalf of my people, what you have done in this war has saved millions of lives." "I am not doing this for thanks," Commander Harper replied. "They are a threat to everyone, Earth included. We fight because we must." "That is not entirely true," said carefully. "Earth could have stayed neutral. They were not threatening human space. You had no reason to involve yourselves in this conflict." Commander Harper was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. There were reasons, strategic calculations, long-term projections about expansion. The decision was not made lightly. "I do not doubt that," said, "but I think there was something more, something personal." The silence stretched between them. Could hear her own heart's beating, loud in the quiet room. I knew a human once, she continued. A long time ago. He was brought to my father's palace as a child. He was my friend for 3 years, the only true friend I have ever had. When the war began, he was sent away. I never saw him again. Commander Harper did not move. He did not speak. His name was Danny Harper. Still nothing. The helmet revealed nothing. The body language revealed nothing. He was as still as a statue, as unreadable as stone. He promised me he would come back, said, her voice barely above a whisper now. He said he would find a way no matter what. I did not believe him. I thought I would never see him again. She took a step forward, then another. She was standing directly in front of him now, close enough to touch. Was I wrong? For a long, terrible moment, Commander Harper said nothing. Then he reached up with both hands and began to release the seals on his helmet. Held her breath. The helmet came off. He was older, of course. 20 years had carved lines into his face. There were scars she did not recognize, marks of battles she could not imagine. His brown hair was shorter now, flecked with gray at the temples. His jaw was harder, his expression more guarded. But his eyes were the same. That deep ocean blue, filled with a gentleness that 20 years of war had not managed to destroy. Danny Harper looked at her with those eyes, and something inside her broke and healed at the same time. "Hello," he said. His voice was different without the helmet, softer, real. "It took me a while, but I told you I would come back." She could not speak. Her throat was tight, her eyes burning with tears she had not shed in decades. She reached out with one trembling hand and touched his face, needing to know that he was real, that this was not a dream. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, human warm, not cool, alive, present here. "Danny," she whispered, just his name, nothing else. He smiled. It was the same smile she remembered, the one that had made her believe him when he said he would return. The smile that said impossible things could be made possible through sheer stubbornness. "I thought about you every day," he said. "In every battle, in every moment of doubt, I remembered the princess who treated me like a person when everyone else saw me as nothing. You were my reason to keep fighting, my reason to stay alive." Did not know what to say. She had spent 20 years preparing herself to never see him again. She had buried her memories of him deep inside, where they could not hurt her. Now they were all flooding back at once, overwhelming her. She stepped back, trying to compose herself. She was a princess of the empire. She could not fall apart in front of a human commander, even if that commander was the boy she had loved as a child. "How?" she managed to ask. "How did you do this? How did you become this?" Danny put his helmet down on the desk. He looked at her with those impossible eyes. "After I left space, I had nothing. No family, no home, no future. The refugee transport dropped me on a border colony and I was on my own. I was 13 years old and I had nowhere to go." He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "I enlisted in the military when I was 16. I lied about my age. They did not ask too many questions. Border colonies needed soldiers and I needed a purpose." "You were a child," said. "I was a survivor." Danny turned back to face her. "I learned quickly. I had to. The border conflicts were brutal and there was no room for weakness, but I had advantages other humans did not. I understood alien species. I could think like them, predict their tactics. All those years in your palace, learning culture, studying your people, it made me different." He paused, something dark passing behind his eyes. "When the war began, I saw what was coming. The empire was going to fall, and when it did, they would not stop. They would expand until they reached Earth. My people would be next." "So you fought to protect Earth," said. Danny shook his head. "I fought to protect you." The words hung in the air between them, felt her heart skip again. "They would have destroyed Danny continued. "They would have burned Prime to ash. They would have killed everyone, including you. I could not allow that, so I built a legend. I became the ghost of Helix 9. I won battle after battle, turning the tide, buying time for Earth to build its forces, to prepare for the alliance that would save your people. You did all of this for me. His voice cracked on the words. Danny stepped closer to her. He was so much smaller than her, so fragile by standards. But in that moment, he seemed like the largest person she had ever known. You were the only person in the entire galaxy who ever treated me like I mattered, he said. You gave me friendship when I had nothing. You protected me when no one else would. For 3 years, you made me feel like I belonged somewhere. He reached up and touched her face, mirroring her gesture from moments before. How could I not come back for you? Felt the tears finally fall. She did not try to stop them. She did not care about dignity or protocol or what a princess should or should not do. She pulled Danny into an embrace, her 4 arms wrapping around him carefully, afraid of hurting him with her strength. He hugged her back, his small human arms barely reaching around her waist. They stayed like that for a long time, 2 friends reunited after 20 years, holding each other in the silence of space. Then the alarms began to scream. They pulled apart as red lights flashed across the room. Danny grabbed his helmet and jammed it back on his head, instantly transforming back into Commander Harper. What is happening? Demanded. Danny was already moving toward the door, pulling up tactical data on his wrist display. Infiltrators, he said, his voice cold and professional once more. They have breached the ship. They are coming for you. The door exploded inward. The assassin came through the shattered door like a nightmare made flesh. It was smaller than most of its kind, built for stealth rather than open combat. Its scales were dark gray, almost black, designed to blend with shadows. Its eyes were yellow slits that fixed on with cold hunger. In its clawed hands, it held a blade made of crystal, poison blades. One cut would kill in minutes. The assassin moved faster than could track. One moment it was in the doorway. The next it was lunging toward her, the blade aimed directly at her heart. Danny was faster. He threw himself between them, taking the blade across his shoulder. Blood sprayed across the wall as he tackled the assassin, driving it backward into the corridor. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs, Danny on top, his hands wrapped around the creature's throat. That was stronger. It threw Danny off and scrambled to its feet, reaching for a second blade on its belt. Danny rolled and came up with a knife that had not seen him draw. He moved like water, flowing around the assassin's strikes, cutting it in a dozen places before it could react. But there was not alone. 2 more infiltrators appeared in the corridor, drawn by the sounds of combat. They charged toward Danny, their claws extended, their mouths open in silent screams of rage. Danny killed the first one with a single precise strike to the throat. He engaged the second, their blades flashing in the emergency lighting, moving so fast that could barely follow. The original assassin saw its chance. While Danny was distracted, it circled around him, heading for once more. Was not helpless. She was a princess of the Empire, trained in combat since childhood. But she was unarmed, unprepared, and the assassin was already too close. The blade descended toward her chest. Danny appeared from nowhere. He grabbed the assassin's arm and twisted, snapping it at the elbow. The creature screamed as Danny drove his knife into its skull, ending its life in an instant. But the movement had cost him. He had turned his back on the second infiltrator for just a moment, and that moment was enough. The claws raked across Danny's back, tearing through his uniform, leaving 4 deep gashes that immediately began to weep blood. Danny staggered but did not fall. He spun and caught the infiltrator by the face, his fingers digging into its eye sockets. The creature thrashed and struggled, but Danny held on with inhuman determination. "Run," he said through gritted teeth. "Get to the bridge, seal the doors." "I will not leave you," she said. "I am not asking." He twisted his hands and the infiltrator went limp. Danny let the body fall and turned to face her. His uniform was soaked with blood, his face pale beneath his helmet. He swayed on his feet, clearly fighting to stay conscious. "Please," he said, "I cannot lose you, not after everything, not now." Wanted to argue. She wanted to stay and fight by his side, but she could see the truth in his eyes. He was injured badly. He needed medical attention immediately, and he would not accept it until he knew she was safe. She reached out and touched his helmet, where his face would be. "Do not die," she said. "That is an order from your princess." She thought she heard him laugh softly. Then she was running, sprinting down the corridor toward the bridge, leaving Danny Harper behind to face whatever came next. 3 hours later, the constellation was secure. The infiltrators were all dead. Somehow, impossibly, Danny had killed 7 of them single-handedly while protecting the path to the bridge. The human soldiers who found him afterward said they had never seen anything like it. He had been surrounded by enemies, wounded in a dozen places, and he had refused to fall. When the medics finally reached him, he was unconscious, lying in a pool of his own blood. They rushed him to the medical bay, their faces grim. Waited outside the operating room for 6 hours. She refused food. She refused rest. She simply stood there, staring at the closed door, willing him to survive. The human doctors emerged eventually, their expressions exhausted but relieved. "He will live," the chief surgeon said. "He lost a lot of blood and the wounds were severe, but Commander Harper has survived worse. He has a remarkable ability to heal." Felt her knees go weak. She caught herself against the wall and forced herself to stay standing. "May I see him?" The surgeon hesitated. "He is not conscious, and he would normally allow no one in his room while recovering, but given the circumstances, I think he would make an exception for you." They let her in. Danny lay on the medical bed, his body connected to a dozen machines. His helmet was gone, removed by the medics to treat a cut on his forehead. Without it, he looked so young, so human. Pulled a chair beside his bed and sat down. She took his hand in hers, careful not to disturb the medical equipment. "You foolish human," she whispered. "You could have died." She sat with him through the night, watching his chest rise and fall, listening to the steady beep of the monitors. She thought about everything that had happened, everything that had led to this moment. 20 years ago, a small human boy had promised to come back for her. He had spent 2 decades turning himself into a weapon, fighting impossible battles, building a legend that would echo across the galaxy. All because a princess had shown him kindness when he had nothing. Humans, she realized, were not like other species. They did not fight for territory or resources or power. They fought for connections, for people, for the bonds that they formed with others. It was irrational, it was foolish, it was beautiful. Danny woke just as the artificial dawn began to light the medical bay. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found her face. A small smile crossed his lips. "You stayed," he said. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Of course I stayed," replied. "Where else would I go?" Danny tried to sit up, then grimaced and fell back against the pillows. Placed a hand on his chest, gently pushing him down. "Rest. You nearly died protecting me. The least you can do is let your body recover." "I have survived worse," Danny said. "That is not reassuring." He laughed, then coughed, then laughed again despite the pain. Felt tears stinging her eyes once more. "Tell me," she said, "tell me everything. What happened to you after you left? How did you become this?" So Danny told her. He told her about the border colonies, the poverty, the desperation of a human boy with nowhere to go. He told her about enlisting in the military, lying about his age, fighting in conflicts that no one cared about for reasons that no one remembered. He told her about the darkness, the years when he had wanted to give up, to stop fighting, to let the galaxy consume him. The nights when the only thing that kept him going was the memory of a princess who had treated him like a person. He told her about Helix 9, the battle that had made him famous. 3 days alone against 200 soldiers, holding a position that everyone else had abandoned, refusing to retreat because there were wounded soldiers behind him who could not escape. "I should have died there," he said. "By every calculation, I should have died 100 times, but I kept thinking about you, about the promise I made, and somehow I kept standing." Listened without interrupting. She held his hand throughout, her grip tightening whenever his voice wavered. When he finished, the room was silent except for the soft hum of the medical equipment. "I am sorry," she said finally. Danny looked at her with confusion. "Sorry for what?" "For what my father did, for sending you away, for all the suffering you endured because of us." Danny shook his head slowly. "Do not apologize. Your father did what he thought was necessary, and the suffering made me who I am. Without it, I would never have been able to come back for you. I would never have been strong enough to make a difference." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Besides, I had a reason to survive. Most people go through life without one. I was lucky." Stared at him. Here was a man who had endured 20 years of war, who had killed countless enemies, who had been wounded and tortured and pushed to the edge of death over and over again. And he called himself lucky. Because he had someone to fight for. "Humans are strange," she said softly. Danny smiled. "We have been told that before." "I mean it as a compliment." "I know." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The artificial sun continued to rise, filling the room with warm light. For the first time in 20 years, felt something she had forgotten she could feel. "Peace. The alliance will be finalized soon," she said eventually. "Our forces will work together against with human tactics and resources, we can win this war." "We will win," Danny agreed. They do not understand what they are facing. They think humans are weak because we are small. They do not realize that our greatest strength has nothing to do with our bodies. "What is it then?" asked. "Your greatest strength?" Danny turned his head to look at her. His eyes were gentle, filled with something that made her heart's race. "We never give up on the people we love." Felt the tears fall again. She did not try to stop them. "I missed you," she whispered. "Every day for 20 years I missed you." "I know," Danny said. "I missed you too." He lifted his hand, despite the pain it must have caused, and touched her face gently. "But I am here now," he said, "and I am not going anywhere, not ever again." Believed him. Against all reason, against all logic, she believed him completely. Because that was what humans did. They made impossible promises and then kept them, no matter the cost. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of deep affection. "Then stay," she said. "Stay and help me end this war, and afterward we will figure out everything else together." Danny closed his eyes and smiled. "Together," he agreed. "I like the sound of that." The war ended on a day that would remember for the rest of her life. It had taken 2 more years of fighting after the alliance was formalized. 2 years of combined human and forces pushing back reclaiming lost territory, breaking the enemy's will to fight. The battles had been brutal, the losses staggering, but the outcome had never truly been in doubt. Not after humanity showed the galaxy what it could do. They had underestimated humans completely. They saw a species that was small, weak, short-lived. They saw prey. What they found instead was something far more dangerous, a species that refused to accept defeat. Human soldiers fought with a ferocity that shocked even They adapted to every tactic they employed, learning and evolving faster than the enemy could respond. They turned weaknesses into strengths and disadvantages into opportunities. But their greatest weapon was not their adaptability or their creativity. It was their stubbornness, their absolute, irrational refusal to give up on each other. Soldiers told stories of human squads that would charge into certain death to rescue a single wounded comrade. They spoke of pilots who would crash their ships into enemy vessels rather than leave a friend behind. They whispered about the ghost of Helix 9, who had personally led the assault on the and stood on the steps of their ruling council as they signed the surrender. The Dominion was broken. The war was over. The celebration on Prime lasted for 7 days. Stood in the throne room of the Imperial Palace, watching her father receive the human delegation. Emperor was ancient now, his silver skin almost white, his 4 arms thin and frail. But his voice was still strong as he spoke the words of gratitude that the entire empire felt. Earth has proven itself, declared. Humanity has earned the respect of the. From this day forward, your species will be recognized as equals, as allies, as friends. The human ambassador accepted the honor with grace, but was not watching the ambassador. She was watching the man who stood behind him, silent and still in his formal uniform. Danny Harper had removed his helmet for the ceremony. His face was visible to the entire court, and murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. This was the ghost of Helix 9. This small, ordinary-looking human, the most feared warrior in the galaxy. Danny ignored the whispers. His eyes found across the crowded room and something passed between them. A silent acknowledgement, a promise renewed. After the ceremony, Emperor requested a private audience with Commander Harper. Attended, as was her right as the heir apparent. The throne room was empty except for the 3 of them, sat on his ancient seat, looking down at the human who had saved his empire. Danny stood straight and still, showing no fear. I understand, said slowly, that we have met before. Danny inclined his head. Yes, Your Majesty, 20 years ago, you brought me to this palace as a curiosity for your daughter. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost ashamed. I treated you as less than you were. I saw you as an animal to be studied, not a person to be respected. I was wrong. Felt her heart stop. Her father never apologized, not to anyone, not ever. Danny did not seem surprised. He met the Emperor's eyes without flinching. You did what you believed was right, he said. I do not hold it against you. The past is past. What matters is what we do now. Studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, painfully, the ancient emperor rose from his throne. He descended the steps until he stood face to face with the human warrior. You saved my people, said. You saved my daughter. You did this not for reward or glory, but because of a promise made 20 years ago by a child. He reached out with one trembling hand and placed it on Danny's shoulder. I have never seen such loyalty, such devotion. I did not know humans were capable of it. With respect, Your Majesty, Danny replied. You never asked. Laughed. It was a rusty sound as if he had forgotten how, but it was genuine. No, he admitted, I did not, and that was my greatest mistake. The Emperor turned to his daughter. His eyes held something she had never seen before, uncertainty. He said, I am old. I will not live many more years. Soon you will rule this empire. But before I go, I want to see you happy. I want to know that you have found what I never could. Did not understand, father. Smiled sadly. I have spent my entire life building power, defending territory, fighting wars. I have never had what this human has, someone worth fighting for, someone who made all the sacrifice meaningful. He stepped back, his hand falling from Danny's shoulder. If there is anything between you two, you have my blessing. Whatever the court says, whatever tradition demands, I do not care. You have both earned the right to choose your own happiness. Felt tears threatening again. She had spent her whole life trying to earn her father's approval, trying to be the perfect princess, the perfect heir. And now he was telling her to forget all of it, to choose herself. She looked at Danny. He looked back at her. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Danny broke the silence. "Your Majesty," he said, "I appreciate your blessing, but I am not here to take your daughter away. I am here to support whatever she chooses. Her happiness matters more to me than my own." Made her decision. 1 week later, she stood before the imperial court and made an announcement that shocked the galaxy. "I am renouncing my claim to the throne," she declared. "I will not be the next empress. Instead, I will serve as the permanent ambassador to Earth." The court erupted in outrage, a princess abandoning her birthright. For what? For a human. But stood firm. She had spent her whole life in this palace, surrounded by cold stone and colder politics. She had watched her brothers die for an empire that demanded everything and gave nothing in return. Danny had shown her another way, the human way, a life built on connections rather than conquests, on loyalty rather than power. She wanted that life. She wanted it more than any throne. On the day she departed for Earth, Danny met her at the shuttle bay. He was out of uniform for the first time since she had known him as an adult. He wore simple clothes, his face bare, his eyes warm. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Looked around at the palace she was leaving behind, the gardens where she had played as a child, the observatory where she had watched Danny's ship disappear into the stars, the corridors she had walked alone for 20 years, waiting for a promise to be kept. "I have never been more sure of anything," she said. Danny smiled. He extended his hand toward her, a human gesture of greeting, or perhaps of beginning. Took it. His fingers were warm against hers, small but strong, the same hand that had held hers on the roof of the observatory so many years ago. "Together?" he asked. "Together," she agreed. They walked into the ship side by side, the doors closed behind them, the engines hummed to life. Through the viewport watched Prime grow smaller and smaller. The palace became a speck, then a memory, then nothing at all. The stars surrounded them, countless and bright. She was not sad, she was not afraid. She was going home. Not to a planet or a palace or an empire. Home was not a place. Home was the person sitting beside her, holding her hand, looking at the same stars with the same wonder she felt. The boy from the stars had come back for her, and now, finally, they could begin the life they had been for so long. The human way. Danny turned to her as the ship entered hyperspace. The universe stretched and blurred around them, reality bending as they crossed the vast distances between worlds. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Considered the question. "I am thinking about something you said to me once," she replied. "When we were children, you told me that humans believe in something called second chances, that no matter how badly things go wrong, there is always the possibility of starting over." Danny nodded. "I remember." "I did not understand it then. Do not think that way. We believe in fate, in destiny, in the inevitable march of time. We accept what is and do not imagine what could be." She turned to face him, her eyes shining. "But you changed that. You showed me that the future is not written, that a boy with nothing can become a legend, that a princess trapped in her tower can break free." She squeezed his hand tightly. "That 20 years of separation cannot destroy a bond between two people who refuse to give up on each other." Danny reached up and touched her face, his fingers gentle against her silver skin. "That is the human way," he said. "We are not the strongest or the longest lived, but we are the most stubborn. When we love something, we hold on with everything we have, and we never ever let go." Leaned into his touch. "Teach me," she whispered. "Teach me to be stubborn like a human." Danny smiled. It was the same smile she had fallen in love with as a child, the same smile that had kept her hopping through 20 years of darkness. "I will," he promised. "We have the rest of our lives." The ship sailed on through hyperspace, carrying them toward Earth, toward the future, toward whatever adventures awaited them next. The war was over, the legends were written, The galaxy had changed forever. But for Danny, the story was just beginning. And they would write it together, one day at a time in the human way. With stubborn, irrational, beautiful love.